I met him at midnight in the middle of the Arizona desert. The stars were bright, but his eyes were brighter, and he looked at me like he'd forgotten how to be seen, until the meteor shower forced us both to admit what neither of us was ready to say. The first time I drove to the observatory, the desert felt like it was holding its breath for me. Everything was too still, too wide, too dark in that way. Only Arizona can be after midnight. My headlights kept catching on little patches of dust that glittered like tiny lost galaxies, and I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this alone? Why do I think I belong here with my camera and my messy hair and that stupid feeling in my chest that always shows up whenever I'm about to chase something that feels too big? The observatory sat on a lonely stretch of rock like some giant silver egg, cracked open to stare at the universe. It looked softer than I expected, kinder somehow, almost like it had been waiting for someone to talk to after years of silence. The dome was half lit and the wind was brushing against the metal. Gently, like it didn't want to wake anything. I grabbed my camera, climbed out, and just stood there for a moment, letting the sky wash over me. The stars were so bright they looked unreal, like someone had poured sugar across black velvet, like I could scoop them up with both hands and they'd cling to my fingers. I swear the sky felt heavier here, thicker, like it had something to say. I was setting up my tripod, maybe humming a little, maybe trying not to think about how quiet everything was when I heard footsteps. Soft ones, slow ones, the kind that tell you the person making them doesn't want to surprise you. But I still jumped, spun around, nearly dropped my lens. There he was, a guy about my age, maybe a little older. Tall in that slightly awkward way, like he was still negotiating with gravity. Messy dark hair, a notebook tucked under his arm, a hooded sweatshirt, even though the night was warm, and eyes. Oh God, those eyes. Quiet eyes. The kind that look like they've seen too much and say absolutely nothing anyway. He blinked at me like he wasn't expecting me to exist. I blinked back like maybe I wasn't expecting him either. For a long moment, it felt like the desert itself decided to listen in. No wind, no night bugs, no distant engine, just us two strangers under a sky that suddenly felt way too intimate. You're not supposed to be out here alone, he finally said, voice low, careful, almost apologetic. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. And you are. He hesitated, then nodded like he couldn't argue with that. This is kind of my thing, he said. I study the night sky. His tone was a little defensive, a little shy, a little something I couldn't name, and I photograph it. I said, our eyes met again. Something soft sparked there like recognition. Like maybe we weren't meant to be alone tonight. Would you trust someone you met in the middle of the desert at midnight? I didn't mean to stare at him, but something about him made it impossible not to. Maybe it was the way he kept looking at the ground, then the sky, then me like he couldn't decide which one made him more nervous. Maybe it was the notebook tucked under his arm, the edges worn, like it had survived sandstorms, rainstorms, maybe even heartbreak. Or maybe it was the silence around him, a deep, calm kind of quiet, the kind that only comes from people who live more in their own minds than in the world. He stepped closer, hands tucked in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched like he didn't want to take up too much space. It's unusual to see someone out here alone at this hour, he said. His voice was steady, but there was a tremble under it, like he wasn't used to conversations, or maybe just not used to conversations that mattered. I like the sky better when the world's asleep. I told him, me too, he admitted. And that was the moment I knew he wasn't dangerous. He was lonely. A breeze drifted between us, stirring the sand, making it dance around our feet like tiny ghosts. I started adjusting my camera again, pretending I wasn't watching him out of the corner of my eye. He stood there like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to leave or stay. Finally, I said, you want to see what I'm shooting tonight? He hesitated so hard I almost laughed, but then he nodded and stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell something soft on him, like cedar and old pages warmed by the sun. He leaned in a little. Not enough to touch, just enough that I felt the warmth rolling off him. You captured M13 beautifully, he said after a moment. I blinked. You know your clusters? He shrugged, a little shy smile flickering. I study them, I guess. You guess? It's my major. He scratched the back of his neck, looking everywhere except my eyes. Astronomy. Ah, so, you're the real deal. He let out a tiny breath that might have been a laugh, hardly. For someone who watched the universe. He avoided human gaze like it burned. What's your name, I asked. He swallowed like the question cracked something open inside him. Elias. The name suited him. Soft around the edges, warm in the middle, a little lost. I'm Lila, I said. His eyes lifted, then slowly like he was afraid of what he'd find. And when our eyes met, something shifted. Something subtle, something undeniable. Lightning didn't strike, the earth didn't shake, but the night air felt suddenly sweeter, like the stars tightened their glow just for us. He glanced at my camera again. You know, he said, most people come here to look at the sky, but not many really see it. And what about you? I asked. His lips quirked. I see everything. The desert wind picked up warm and restless, like it knew things were about to change. Do you think Elias is shy? Or hiding something? The desert had a quiet that you couldn't find anywhere else. Not the city, not even a forest. It was a silence that made every sound, the click of a camera, the shuffle of feet on gravel, the whisper of the wind, feel amplified, intimate. He arrived at the observatory later that night, carrying his camera like it was part of him. I waved, trying to hide my nerves, though my heart had been racing since I caught sight of him at the parking lot. You're on time, I said, gesturing toward the telescope. He grinned, cheeks flushing under the faint light from the observatory. I didn't want to miss this. Meteor showers don't wait for anyone, right? I nodded, guiding him to the telescope. Here, I'll show you how to set the focus. It's tricky, but worth it. As he leaned over the lens, his fingers brushed mine briefly. I didn't pull away. That touch felt like permission to let myself care, to let the quiet curiosity in my heart bloom. We took turns adjusting the telescope, pointing it toward the darkest patches of sky. I explained the constellations, naming them as if I'd known them forever. He listened, asking questions that were careful but curious, not too intrusive. I've never seen Saturn like this, he said softly, eyes wide behind his glasses. It's mesmerizing. Yeah, I said, smiling. It's the rings. They make it different from all the other planets, a reminder that some things are worth looking closer at. He nodded, letting the silence stretch, letting the night fold around us. And then slowly, almost hesitantly, he asked, "Do you ever get lonely out here?" I blinked, surprised by the intimacy of the question. I wasn't used to people asking about my loneliness. Most just assumed I liked the solitude. Sometimes, I admitted. But nights like this, it doesn't feel lonely, not when someone else is here looking up at the same sky. He smiled, a little awkward but genuine. I feel the same. I never realized how comforting it could be to just share the silence. We stayed there for hours, pointing out stars, talking about everything and nothing. I shared stories of my childhood, of how I'd first fallen in love with the night sky. He spoke quietly about his own dreams, about the fears that kept him from opening up, about the astronomy program he'd almost given up on. And in that quiet desert, under a sky so vast it made everything else feel small, I realized something. This was the kind of connection you couldn't rush. It grew slowly, like the orbit of a planet, like the rising of a meteor across the horizon. When he finally packed up his camera, he lingered at the edge of the observatory deck. "Thank you," he said, eyes fixed on mine, "for letting me be here, for showing me this." I smiled, heart fluttering. "Anytime. The sky's big enough for both of us." As he walked back to his car, I leaned against the telescope, gazing upward. The stars seemed brighter somehow, like they were shining just for us. And I knew that this night, this connection, was only the beginning. Have you ever shared a quiet, magical moment with someone that made you feel instantly connected? Would you let someone into your world this way? The next evening, I found myself waiting at the observatory a little earlier than usual, anticipation prickling through me like static. The desert air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and sand. My telescope was ready, lenses polished, camera batteries charged. He arrived just as the first stars began to appear, carrying his camera bag and that nervous smile that made my chest flutter every time. "Hey," he said, adjusting the strap. "I didn't think I'd make it on time again." "You're here," I said simply, smiling. That was all that mattered. We began with the usual, setting up the telescope, checking the camera settings, pointing it at Jupiter first. I loved showing him the planets, but tonight, something felt different. He was more relaxed, his questions lighter, his laughter easier. "Do you think aliens exist?" he asked suddenly, leaning over my shoulder. I laughed, surprised by the suddenness. "I don't know, maybe. The universe is too big not to have someone else out there, right?" He grinned, snapping a photo of the telescope lens reflecting the stars. "I like your optimism." We moved from planet to planet, sharing snacks I'd brought, chocolate, granola bars, little bites of comfort for the long night ahead. Every time he offered me some of his coffee, steaming in the cold desert night, I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with caffeine. At one point, he leaned back against the railing, gazing at the sky. "You know, I never thought stargazing could be fun. But with you, it's not just fun. It's like the sky is alive." I smiled, heart fluttering. "It's alive if you want it to be. You just have to pay attention." Then he surprised me. "Want to try something?" Before I could ask what he meant, he handed me his camera and motioned toward the sky. "Capture it, any way you feel it." I hesitated, then lifted the lens and clicked. Star trails spun across the sensor, turning the dark desert night into a canvas of light. He leaned over, guiding my hands, his fingers brushing mine gently. The contact made me shiver, but it felt natural, right? For hours, we rotated between telescope and camera, swapping tips, teasing each other when mistakes were made, laughing so freely that the quiet desert seemed to echo with it. I realized that the moments with him were becoming the highlight of my nights, something I craved beyond reason. When the wind picked up and the first hint of dawn crept along the horizon, he sat beside me in comfortable silence. Neither of us spoke for a long while, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities, connection, and a slow-burning warmth that I couldn't ignore. Finally, he whispered, almost to himself, "I don't think I want to stargaze alone anymore." I turned to him, heart racing. "You don't have to," I replied softly. "Not ever." The desert stretched around us, vast and infinite, but in that moment, it felt like it existed only for the two of us. Have you ever spent a night under the stars with someone and felt like the world had disappeared? Would you let yourself get lost in that moment? That week, our nightly visits became something I looked forward to more than anything else. The desert nights weren't just about stars anymore. They were about him, his laughter, the way he leaned close when showing me a new constellation, the way he listened when I rambled about my research or my dreams. One night, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a ribbon of silver, and I noticed him looking at me instead of the stars. I caught my breath, heart beating faster than the spinning planets we tracked through the telescope. "You know," he said softly, "I never really liked astronomy before. Not like this." I tilted my head, curiosity sparking. "Not like this? Not with someone like you." His voice was low, sincere, and for a moment it felt like the desert itself had leaned in to hear him. "You make it magical. Like the sky is a story, and you're telling it." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but I couldn't stop the smile. I feel the same," I admitted, surprising even myself. "I didn't know I could enjoy it this much until you showed up." He laughed softly, a sound that made the quiet night feel warmer. "So we're officially partners in stargazing?" "Partners," I said, nodding. And in that small word, I felt the weight of unspoken feelings, the kind that had been building slowly like a constellation forming in the night sky. We spent the night swapping secrets as we scanned the heavens, small confessions about childhood dreams, embarrassing moments in college, and the things we feared no one else would understand. The telescope became more than a tool. It was a bridge between our worlds. At some point, I noticed a shooting star streak across the sky, leaving a fleeting trail of light. Without thinking, I whispered a wish, my hand brushing against his as I reached for the camera. He caught my gaze and we laughed softly at the timing, both of us pretending it was coincidence, but I felt something electric in that touch. "Make a wish," he said, nudging me gently. "I just did," I murmured, glancing down, unsure if he'd noticed my blush. He smiled knowingly, and in the quiet that followed, it felt like the desert The stars and the night itself were conspiring to bring us closer. My heart was full, brimming with anticipation and hope, and I realized that the more time I spent with him under these stars, the harder it became to imagine a night without him. When he finally packed up his camera, we lingered at the edge of the observatory deck, hands brushing again, hearts quietly syncing with the rhythm of the universe. Tomorrow night, he said softly. Same time? Same time, I agreed, smiling through the rush of feelings I couldn't yet name aloud. And as he walked away toward his car, I looked up at the Milky Way, feeling a quiet certainty. Somehow, the stars had led him to me, and I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. Have you ever shared secrets under the stars with someone and felt closer in a single night than you had in months? Would you let that connection grow? The week had flown by, each night at the observatory blurring into the next. I found myself anticipating his arrival, the sound of his footsteps on gravel, the smell of his jacket mingling with the crisp desert air, the way he always managed to make the stars feel closer. That night, the meteor shower was predicted to peak, a rare celestial event that would streak across the sky, painting it with trails of silver. I had been counting down, adjusting my telescope, checking my camera, and quietly hoping he wouldn't miss it. He arrived a little out of breath, carrying his camera and tripod. You wouldn't believe the traffic, he said, laughing. But the way he looked at me, a mix of excitement and something softer, made my heart leap. Don't worry, I said, motioning toward the telescope. We've got front row seats. We spent the first hour tracking constellations, showing each other the faintest stars, comparing photos on our cameras. I caught him sneaking glances at me while adjusting the lens, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Then suddenly the sky lit up with the first meteor. I gasped, pointing. Look! He leaned close, brushing against my shoulder as we both followed the streak. It's incredible, he whispered, his breath warm against my neck. Almost like the universe is putting on a show just for us. I smiled, feeling a surge of something I couldn't quite name. I think it is. We counted meteors together, laughing each time one surprised us. At one point, he handed me his camera. Here, he said, capture one, make a wish. I hesitated, then lifted the lens and clicked just as a meteor streaked past. I wished, I admitted softly, my fingers brushing his again. What did you wish for? He asked, voice low, almost teasing, but I caught the seriousness in his eyes. I shrugged, unable to put it into words. Some things didn't need to be spoken aloud. Instead, I watched him, feeling that same electric current in the silence between us. As the meteor shower intensified, I felt him lean closer. I'm glad I met you, he said, almost a whisper. I don't think I'd be standing here tonight without you. I turned to him, heart fluttering. Me neither. The night stretched on, meteors streaking endlessly, and we stayed side by side, sharing warmth, laughter, and quiet confessions. Each meteor felt like a promise, a small miracle connecting us under the vast desert sky. When he finally packed up his camera, we lingered on the deck, our hands brushing as if neither of us wanted to let go. Same time tomorrow? He asked, hope in his voice. Same time, I replied, smiling, feeling that the universe had delivered more than just shooting stars. It had delivered him. And in that quiet desert night, under a sky filled with infinite possibilities, I realized that this connection, this closeness, this quiet magic was something I never wanted to end. Have you ever witnessed something so beautiful it made you feel closer to someone instantly? Would you admit your feelings under the stars? The desert had a way of making everything feel sharper. The cold night air, the twinkling stars, the flutter of my heart whenever he was near. By now our routine was unspoken. I arrived first, telescope ready, camera charged, and he appeared shortly after, carrying his equipment and that easy smile that made everything feel lighter. That night, the meteor shower had passed, leaving the sky sprinkled with faint, lingering trails of light. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of desert sage, and we were both quiet for a while, letting the night settle around us. I've been meaning to ask you something, he said softly, his eyes on the horizon rather than mine. I tilted my head, curiosity piqued. What is it? He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. Why do you spend so many nights out here? I mean, you could be anywhere, doing anything. Why the observatory? I smiled faintly, brushing my fingers over the telescope. Because it's the only place where I feel at peace, where I can breathe, think, and not feel like the world is closing in. He nodded slowly, understanding. I get that. Out here, the universe feels infinite, and maybe it's easier to be yourself. I laughed softly, the sound mingling with the wind. Exactly. And now you're here, learning that lesson with me. He turned toward me, a faint blush warming his cheeks. I didn't realize how much I needed this. The stars, the quiet, and you. It's like I finally found something I didn't even know I was looking for. My heart skipped. I'd felt the same way for weeks, but had kept it tucked under layers of words unspoken and fears unshared. I feel the same, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I've never wanted to share this with anyone before, but with you, it feels right. His eyes softened and he stepped closer. I've been scared, afraid of messing it up, afraid that you'd see me for who I really am and walk away. I won't walk away, I said firmly, placing my hand over his. Not now, not ever. Not when it feels like we finally found something real. The desert wind blew around us, carrying the quiet power of that moment. Stars twinkled above, indifferent to everything, yet somehow witness to the beginning of something beautiful. I felt his hand brush mine, linger, and in that small contact, I understood. The night, the sky, the infinite universe. It had led us here. To honesty, to connection, to the first step toward love. We stayed there for hours, sharing stories, laughter, and long silences that spoke more than words ever could. By the time he finally packed up his camera, we lingered on the deck, reluctant to part. Same time tomorrow? He asked, hope in his voice. Same time, I replied, smiling, heart full. The desert night had given me stars, wind, and him, a constellation of possibility in the vast darkness. Have you ever shared a quiet moment that made you realize your feelings for someone? Would you admit your heart under the stars? That week, anticipation hummed in the desert air. A rare meteor shower was predicted, bigger than any we'd seen before, and I could feel it in my bones. Tonight would be different. The stars themselves seemed to pulse with possibility as I arrived at the observatory, telescope in hand, heart beating faster than the planets spinning above us. He appeared shortly after, carrying his camera and tripod like it was an extension of himself. His hair was windswept, cheeks flushed from the drive, and when he saw me, his grin made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't quite explain. "Ready for the show of a lifetime?" he asked, voice low, eyes sparkling under the starlight. "More than ready," I replied, smiling, though nerves danced along my spine. The first meteors streaked across the sky, brief silver arcs that seemed almost unreal. We counted them together, laughing at how unpredictable they were, how each streak felt like a fleeting secret shared only between us. I caught his hand in mine when the next meteor blazed, and he didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers intertwined with mine. Warm, grounding, familiar. "This is insane," he whispered, voice trembling slightly. "I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I admitted, letting my head tilt against his shoulder for just a moment. The world felt suspended, a delicate pause between what had been and what could be. As the meteor shower intensified, I noticed his eyes on me more than the sky. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, suddenly serious, and my chest tightened. I turned to him, searching his gaze. "What is it?" I don't want these nights to end. Not ever," he confessed, voice breaking slightly with honesty. "Being here with you under this sky, it's the first time I felt whole. I think I'm falling for you." My heart skipped violently, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I'd been trying to name this feeling for weeks, denying it even as it burned brighter each night. "I'm falling too," I whispered, unable to stop the words from spilling. "I've been falling since the first night you showed up." The desert wind carried our laughter, our tears, our confessions. Meteors streaked overhead, each one feeling like a blessing, a promise, a miracle. In that infinite sky, nothing else mattered but us, the stars, and the quiet certainty that this connection, fragile, bright, and extraordinary, was finally real. We stayed on the observatory deck for hours, holding hands, pointing out constellations, and sharing whispered dreams beneath the falling meteors. The universe, vast and endless, had witnessed the beginning of something beautiful, something neither of us could have predicted, but both had needed. When the first hint of dawn crept along the horizon, we packed up slowly, lingering in the soft desert light. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, hope threading his words. "Always," I replied, smiling. And as he walked toward his car, I looked up at the fading meteors and felt a quiet certainty. Some nights change everything, and tonight was ours. Have you ever experienced a moment under the stars that changed how you felt about someone forever? Would you confess your feelings in that moment? After the meteor shower, everything felt different. The desert nights weren't just about stargazing anymore. They were about him, about us. I found myself smiling at the thought of him before I even reached the observatory, imagining the way his hair caught the faint glow of the moon and how his laughter would float across the desert air. That night, he arrived earlier than usual, carrying his camera bag and a thermos of hot chocolate. "I thought you might be cold," he said, handing me a cup. The warmth of the drink was nothing compared to the warmth spreading through me just from his smile. We began our usual routine, adjusting telescopes, comparing notes, swapping cameras, but our conversation wandered beyond constellations. He told me about the astrophotography project he'd been dreaming of, how he wanted to capture galaxies in a way no one had before. I shared stories about my astronomy research, about nights I spent alone, wondering if anyone could understand the quiet obsession I had with the stars. "You know," he said, leaning closer over the telescope, "I think I finally understand why you love this so much. It's not just the stars, it's everything you bring to it. Your curiosity, your patience, your heart." My chest tightened. "You make it easy to care," I whispered. "Being here with you, it's different. I feel like I'm seen." He reached out and brushed my hand with his fingers, a touch so light it was almost electricity. "I see you," he said softly, voice husky. "I see everything you are, even the parts you try to hide." The wind picked up slightly, stirring the desert sage, and I felt it brush through my hair like a gentle whisper. We stood side by side, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments that felt like promises. I realized then that the bond between us wasn't just fleeting, it was real, growing deeper with every shared glance, every small touch, every whispered confession under the vast sky. Then he handed me his camera. "Want to try capturing the Milky Way? I think tonight it'll look incredible." I nodded, lifting the lens, but my fingers trembled slightly as our hands brushed again. He leaned close to guide me, and for a long moment, we didn't speak. We just looked at the sky together, sharing the quiet awe of a universe so immense it made our worries feel small and our hearts feel infinite. When he finally packed up his camera, we lingered on the observatory deck, neither of us ready to break the spell. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked quietly. "Same time," I replied, heartful, knowing that our nights together under the stars were becoming the most important part of my life. The desert stretched endlessly around us, but in that moment, it felt like the universe existed solely to bring us together. Have you ever felt a connection with someone so strong it made the world disappear around you? Would you let yourself trust it fully? The night of the rarest meteor shower had passed, but the desert still held a quiet magic. I arrived at the observatory, telescope and camera in hand, heart thumping with anticipation. Tonight felt different, heavier with possibilities, brighter with the memory of confessions, lighter with the promise of what was to come. He arrived shortly after, carrying his tripod and camera, looking both nervous and thrilled. "I hope you're ready," he said with a grin, eyes sparkling under the faint light of the desert. "Tonight might outshine everything we've seen before." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. "I'm ready, as long as we're watching it together." We set up the telescope and cameras, swapping jokes and playful teasing, but beneath the laughter was a quiet understanding. This night was more than stargazing. It was a culmination of all the evenings we'd shared, all the secrets, all the laughter, and all the small moments that had drawn us closer. As the first meteors streaked across the sky, I felt him lean against me, a gentle pressure that made my heart soar. Do you ever think about how vast this universe is? He asked softly. All the time, I replied. And yet, it feels like it brought us here, to this moment, to each other. He turned to me, eyes wide and serious. I don't want to imagine my nights without you anymore. You've changed everything. I love you. My chest tightened, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I love you too, I whispered, unable to contain it any longer. I've been falling for you since the first night you showed up. The meteor shower intensified, streaking silver trails across the desert sky like the universe itself was celebrating. We laughed and cried quietly, holding each other, feeling the immense, infinite night fold around us. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the vastness of the cosmos, not the worries of tomorrow, only us. Only the connection we had nurtured under the stars. We spent hours sharing dreams, pointing out constellations, and capturing the night through our lenses, but mostly, we just existed together, hand in hand, hearts beating in sync with the universe. Each meteor felt like a promise, a silent affirmation that some connections are written in the stars, meant to be. By the time the desert's first light touched the horizon, we were still on the observatory deck, reluctant to leave, savoring the quiet intimacy of our night. Same time tomorrow? He asked softly, hope and tenderness in his voice. Same time, I said, smiling through tears, feeling the certainty that some loves are infinite, like the stars themselves. And as we packed up our cameras, stepping onto the sand, I realized that the universe, vast, mysterious, and endless, had led me to exactly where I was meant to be, with him, under the stars, in the quiet magic we had found together. Have you ever experienced a moment under the stars that changed everything between you and someone? Would you let the universe guide your heart?